And welcome back. Recent shifts in federal labor and immigration policies are stirring a national debate and creating ripple effects in communities across the country. From labor shortages in key industries to legal battles over union rights, the economic and human impact of these decisions are being felt on factory floors, small businesses, and even in the halls of the Vatican. Joining me now is the founding partner of the Boyd Law Group, Patrick Boyd. And Patrick, good to have you as always, and looking forward to this conversation, my brother.
Always a pleasure, Daren. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. In my last segment, we were talking a little bit about mass incarceration, right? And mass incarceration and then also mass deportation. From what we're hearing and from what we're seeing, give me your impact that you're seeing by results of these mass deportations.
Yeah, it's an important question to focus on and to consider. I mean, I think probably the most important thing to think about is the impact on small businesses, Daren. The stats indicate that about a third of small business employees are immigrants, and about half of small businesses in New York and Connecticut are run by immigrants. So that's a huge swath of the workforce where immigration issues are relevant and of concern. The administration has been unabashed in their protocols and desire to find undocumented workers, to punish them, to deport them, and frankly, to also punish and find those employers who might be employing those workers. It's had a great impact on the security of the small businesses. For our office, what we're getting a lot of is calls from small businesses who get notices from the government with the intention of the government auditing their payroll and reviewing their workforce again, which scares them, costs them money because they have to call us to help with it, and destabilizes the workplace overall for just a ton of small businesses, which are a big part of the economy here in the tri-state area.
Yeah. I'm looking at some notes here, and immigrants accounted for approximately a third of jobs in 2023 in New York and Connecticut, seeing similar numbers. These numbers are pretty huge. When we talk about these incarcerations and deportations, business and the way that crunch is happening right now, I can be honest, I remember I was sitting at a restaurant not too long ago, and there was a gentleman who was there, and he was upset. He was an owner. He says, a business owner. He says, I don't know what to do because a quarter of my force got taken by ICE today. And
Right.
so I'm stuck. This is a story that we hear constantly across the tri-state area, but in the end, the average person possibly could be the one that's going to bear the brunt of it with higher costs and more delays.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And to your point, with that particular restaurateur, I suppose he knew what was happening. A fair amount of our small business owners are showing up to work, and they just don't have the workers that they expected. They don't know why the workers aren't there. The workers sometimes don't even know whether they're adequately or supposed to be fearful, but they don't want to get in trouble, so they don't show up. And so all of a sudden, you might have 3 or 4 less people in the workplace. Another social tie-in that I think is sometimes missed is that oftentimes there are very valuable social services being offered by people who are immigrants. So perhaps you have an elderly parent that's being cared for or looked after by a person who's a recent immigrant, or perhaps your children are being cared for after school by somebody like that who may all of a sudden not show up, not because they don't want to do their jobs, not because they're good people, but because they're scared and they don't understand what's happening with the law. And I think that's one of the extra concerns here is not just that the initiative is being presented so aggressively, but that there's not adequate education about its impact. So people, when in doubt, they worry.
I think you made a very good point when we talked about this whole thing with small businesses being impacted and how the immigration issue is really affecting small businesses. I do want to say that thinking again, you got 2 challenges, right? Here's one challenge. One challenge is I lose my workforce because of deportation and ICE, but then I also lose my workforce because of fear. Because
Right.
as you have people who are saying, listen, I haven't been deported yet, but Lord knows I don't want to go out. I don't want to come out of the house because I don't want to get caught up in it.
Yeah,
And this is what a lot of people are. This is what a lot of people are dealing with.
that's right, and or maybe it's not them, right? Maybe it's just their husband or their wife or their spouse or their neighbors or somebody they share a house with. They just don't know. Immigration law is terribly intricate, terribly complicated. They're not certain about their status. They're still waiting on approval for this or that. But the fear winds up motivating them to not show up for work, to not help. And if that means we're losing one third potentially of the workers that we rely on in this state, or even in the tri-state area, perhaps, that's a meaningful drag on an economy that we're already worried about.
Yeah. Let me shift gears a little bit, talk about the president in another area, which is the anti-union executive orders. And if you could bring us up to speed as to where we are with the executive order and what the potential is there.
Sure. So on March 27th, an executive order was issued by the President of the United States, ultimately phrased as the executive branch seeking more untethered freedom to regulate sort of security-based agencies, and also to enhance the executive branch's control over operational efficiency. And this is consistent, of course, with the president's platform. He was going to cut government, look into government, create or cut inefficiencies. But this has been a very, very aggressive push towards that. The executive order is ultimately designed to allow the president to avoid negotiating over terms and conditions of employment, meaning that he can let people go faster with less time to abide by their collective bargaining agreements in doing so. Workers have collective bargaining agreements for how they're paid, when they're paid, what their schedule is, whether they can be let go and for what reasons. The president is saying in this executive order, well, I want to be efficient about this, so I want to be able to avoid or give less regard to those collectively bargained for rights of workers, meaning I can lay them off faster, I can cut government jobs more quickly, and I can be more efficient about it. And again, this is leading to that concern and that fear that we're talking about. Partially, workers are being impacted, and partially, workers are scared about whether they will be impacted. The president's executive order will impact things like the Department of State, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs. That most of the news reporting says it's potentially about 1 million organized workers being impacted. And there have been several court challenges to the president's authority to do this, but the law isn't precisely clear. And a lot of the courts have to wait to see what he does before they can enjoin him from doing it.
Yeah.
So there was a recent ruling in May from an appellate court in D.C. that says, for now, he can go ahead and start cutting, start changing, start making more efficient, in his version of the way to describe it, these agencies.
And from your perspective, I mean, the president says the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 does give him some authority there to be able to do what he's doing. As a legal person, you're the man. I'm leaning on you. Does he have a point here?
Well, I mean, I think probably one of the most important informative observations is the one you just made. We're talking about something that was a law or a piece of legislation from 1978. And he's taking an approach so novel that we're considering it now in 2025, right? So it's roughly looking to change and redefine a law that's almost 50 years old. I think the president, if you were to look on a scope of analysis, the president's authority is far more strong when it comes to regulating things like national security, right? So potentially the FBI, potentially the Department of Defense, right? The Department of State. When he starts to get into the Department of Treasury, the Department of Energy and Health and Human Services, and some of those other departments, I think he's on thinner ice. I think everybody would agree with that analysis. And I think you have to look at it from two perspectives. One, he's looking at something very differently than people have been looking at it for 50 years to start with, which is very destabilizing. But then two, if you want to analyze the scope of his authority from a legal perspective, the more his efforts are tied into national security, the greater his powers, the more they're tied into social services, veterans affairs, health and human services, the weaker his arguments probably are.
Yeah. So how do we see this playing out?
I think that the president is likely to lose more than he wins in this, as he has in many of his endeavors. But two things happen: one, he wins in some places, and two, and we've sort of talked about this already, the efforts inspire fear that leads to a social impact, even if the legal impact isn't that significant. In other words, are we going to lose valuable people from state, Department of Defense, Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Treasury because their jobs are less secure, or they're worried that their jobs are less secure? Yes, for sure, even if the president loses on the law. Are we going to have people stop helping parents, stop serving in restaurants, stop coming to work because they're scared, even if their immigration status is secure? Yes, the fear is still going to have a motivation. So I guess that's probably the best way to put it. I think he's going to win some legal battles, probably lose more, but I think the fear is going to lead to a greater efficiency in what he's doing. And that may mean that it's ultimately a successful set of initiatives.
Yeah. Let's hop on a plane for a minute, go across the Atlantic, head out there towards Italy. We do have a new elected pope, Pope Leo XIV. We do know some things, that he is a Chicago White Sox fan and not a Chicago Cubs fan. We want to make that very clear. He wants to make that very clear. We know that he's the first American-born pope, and he also know that he's also, prior to that as a cardinal, spoken out on some of the injustices that have occurred by way of workplace. Talk to me now about this new pope and Pope Leo the 14th, and as whether or not we've actually heard him say anything when it comes to, since his papacy has begun, anything with workers' rights.
Sure. So yes, our first American-born pope, born in Chicago, educated in Chicago and at Villanova in Pennsylvania. Probably one of the more important indications of what he's going to do is the name he's chosen. There were earlier Pope Leos, all dedicated in a meaningful way to the advocacy for workers' rights. A professor I worked for a long time ago used to write about the papal encyclicals, which are sort of the Vatican's positions on workers' rights, dignity, and the morality of important workers' opportunities. Probably the most important thing that this pope has spoken on, and this is not since he ascended to pope, but as a cardinal, is the importance of workers' rights, dignity, opportunities, and the preservation of those rights, dignities, and opportunities in light of new workplace efficiencies, AI now being that, but the church weighed in very heavily on workers' rights back at the times of the Industrial Revolution, and he's referred often to the importance of finding dignity and strength and opportunity in work for people when there are technological changes. So I think we can count on him for that. Perhaps a useful opportunity also, just in the sense that for the church to choose an American is for the church to perhaps choose to recognize the U.S. as a leader, as an interesting counterbalance to some of the things we've been talking about. The U.S. has come a long way in ways that we've talked about recently on your show, in adding for workers' rights, more sick leave, more paternity leave, more maternity leave, more opportunities for worker success, more diversity and inclusion in the workforce. And hopefully we can turn an ear towards the Pope as he talks about how the U.S. has led and can continue to lead the country and the world, as other religious leaders do.
Yeah. I mean, as we're moving now into this 2025 year, I want to think about for a moment and let you give me your thought about the voice of the Pope. We know back in the day, the Pope spoke, it was quite powerful. Catholics definitely, but the world embraced what the Pope had to say. Given the political landscape of what's going on here, with him being an American, with him also, coming from where he's come from, how do you sense his voice weighing out when it comes to issues like workers' rights and human rights? And I guess my question would be more of the listening ear. How much of a listening ear do you think that he's going to get from people across America and in the world?
Well, as in America, I think the church believes, and I do, that he's going to speak to Americans in a uniquely significant way. As a man who spent a great deal of time traveling and a great deal of time in Peru, if I recall correctly, I think he's also going to have a good finger on the pulse of world leadership and understanding how privileged we are here in this country in comparison to how many places can take what we've done and what we've accomplished as a guidepost for what they can hope to do. Um, I mean, frankly speaking, I think the church also needs to and wants to re-engage the American and the U.S. In order to raise money to try to help in furtherance of the advancement of people, both in the U.S. and abroad, with a lot of social missions. So, I guess I can only say that it's meaningful right now to have a U.S.-born pope. I think it's a very big signal from the church. And I think it's likely, if the church has what they want, to change the amount of weight the Pope's voice has in the States and as a voice for social justice in a time where we desperately need some balance, some perspective, some global insights as to how lucky we are and how much of an obligation our luck has on how we continue to operate here and influence the way other people will perhaps look at us as leaders.
Yeah. With this political administration, and not just mentioning the Pope, but literally the President of the United States, and all that's come on with the amount of executive orders, what are we seeing by way of court costs? Because I am sure that this is a number that we're not even going to, that gets not even enough coverage, if you will, because has to be an astronomical amount of court fees and costs, given the fact of all these decisions that have come down.
Yeah, well, I would have to agree. It's been a tumultuous time in the economy with the market. It's been a tumultuous time in the labor markets, and it's been a tumultuous time in the courts as a result. Is the government spending time, effort, and money in court? Yes. Are small businesses going to be spending time and money in court? Yes. Is all of that going to cause a drain on resources that might otherwise be used for more efficient and productive things? Yes, I think without question. And maybe that's the best way to answer your question. I think that the overarching sentiment I have as a person who works with the workforce and people involved in labor, it is partially the litigation itself, but it is mostly the uncertainty as to all the things that are being litigated that is likely to slow things down, make things inefficient, and probably cause a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of destabilized families also.
Yeah. Things that we should be paying attention to before we go?
I guess the only thing I would say is that for the most part, I have found the court decisions to be tempered. And I think the Supreme Court has spent a lot of good, thoughtful time in mulling over their decisions and work. So as much as people are alarmed by what they're hearing and seeing, I would encourage them to spend the time to lean in and read the decisions of the judges who take their jobs very seriously and who are, on balance, very successful legal minds who chose to take less money to sit on the bench and are very talented. I think we can have a lot of faith in each other and in our court system.
Yeah. And I know with the passing of the New York State budget here now, a lot of people have been talking about that we may be seeing some more litigation as well. There's a lot of things that are just happening politically that leads to the court system. But then again, that gives you and I an opportunity to really chat it up a lot.
Plenty to talk about. It's been a miraculously bumpy 100 days. I suspect it'll be a miraculously bumping 4 years. And it's always a great opportunity to talk with you, hear your other guests, and to hear you and the questions you have and the observations you have. So thank you for having me on again.
No, thank you. I really appreciate having you here. And I don't know how much time we have. I just want to double check before I get this one more question in here at least. Okay, good. They're telling me I got 1 second left. But as far 1 minute left before I get out of here. So let me get this here into you real quickly. As we look towards 2025, obviously these worker rights are going to be coming to the forefront. Are we looking for any big landmark decision real quickly that's going to say, hey, and the immigration thing as far as immigrant workers, anything big that we can look to and say, hey, pay attention to this. If this happens, this turns this left.
I suspect that the administration is going to continue to lose more than they win. And what I don't know is whether or not that's going to change the political wherewithal of the administration, or whether they believe that destabilizing things by fighting is nevertheless worth it because of the destabilization and sort of the fear or the urging in a particular direction that comes with it. So, if I were to be thinking about what I expect to see next, it's really just I'm going to be observing whether or not if there are a cascade of losses or half wins for the administration, whether or not they're going to lose momentum and have potentially less support or not, and how that's going to influence what they do next. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot to pay attention to. Patrick, thanks a lot. You always make it make sense, is what we say around the way. So thanks a lot for making it make sense.
Always a pleasure.
All right, Patrick Boyd, founding partner of the Boyd Law Group. Thanking him for joining us.